Hello, my name is Marjorie Anderson, and welcome to my presentation on respondents' views of digital tutorials versus print. I'm going to talk a little bit about using simulations versus print tutorials for learning Excel, specifically if-then statements, and then I'm going to talk about students' views of those. But before we can start looking at student views of tutorials, we have to understand the differences between the interfaces and why it matters that we understand how students approach these and deal with them. So if you are taking a class in Excel and you're trying to learn how to use it, the first thing that you're going to do is get this really thick textbook, or you're going to work with an ebook. I typically encourage my students to work with a hard copy book because when they get to their assignments, they can flip back and forth into the tutorial much more easily than they can in an ebook. Regardless, the actual text and images will be the same, and we call this a static text and image tutorial. And you're going to have a page that looks similar to this. We'll have a broad explanation of what we're going to learn, why we're going to learn it. And this is going to say we're going to enter an if function. Why? We can read this. Students don't, but they can. What we're most interested in is this section on the tutorial. So step one is going to tell me to click in cell B9, and it's going to tell me to insert an if function. So in here I would have data, but I'm going to go to B9, and I'm going to go to my insert tab, and I'm going to say, okay, where's my functions? How do I insert things? Where do I do this? And I'm going to have to work inside of Excel itself. Now, if I lose my menu and want it back, I have to figure out how to do that. If I'm on the wrong sheet, or I have blank sheets, or I have things all over the place, I'm going to have to learn how to do that. I'm going to have to learn how to work with different aspects of the software directly. You'll notice on the Insert tab, there is no insert function. Where I actually want to be is on the Formulas tab, Insert function. So I'm going to have to learn to deal with all of those sorts of things. Also, if I'm working with a laptop and this menu is smaller, I'm a lot of times not even going to have names. I'm going to have symbols and really scrunched up tiny icons. And I'm going to work back and forth with my tutorial until I get all the way through the steps. Then I'm going to come to an assignment that looks like this. And this assignment's going to be the same whether I've learned inside of a digital simulator, worked with the ebook, or worked with the hard copy. And I'm going to have to go through each one of these project steps. And I'm going to have to use my information, my resources, including the tutorial, and I'm going to have to go back and forth and work through this and practice these skills. Because in computers, we have a rule of 3 that you have to do things at least 3 times before they start to gel. It's not a hard and fast thing, but it's sort of where our expectations are. Now, if I'm working with a simulated tutorial, it's going to look like this. I'm going to begin with an introduction, which still involves reading. So my students are thinking, ooh, I don't have to read if we go simulator. Sorry guys, nope, we still have lots of reading. Then Excel is going to let me observe the steps, and they're going to give me information. So let's select cell F4. Yay!
On the formula bar, click the Insert Function button.
And it's going to go on like that. Then I can practice it, and then I can apply it where I have to do it without any extra help. My concern with that observe stage is twofold. First of all, hopefully you can hear there's some audio. Is the audio useful or is it distracting? I don't actually know because I don't have the research onto this. The other issue is, are they actually observing it? If I go and check my messages, I'm texting my friends, I'm surfing the internet, am I actually learning the skills? Again, I don't know. That's why we need research into this. If I am working with a hard copy tutorial or an ebook and I leave off on this step, when I come back, it's still on this step. When I'm working with a digital tutorial, I don't know. It has the advantage of letting them loop back, and ideally we're hoping that they go back and practice the things they don't get. But again, if they're not, then they're not actually getting this. So that's why we need research into whether or not this simulation is as effective as our static text and images. Before we ever start implementing these sorts of things, though, I need to know how my students feel about it. Are they nervous? Are they excited? Do they not care? Are they going to want to work with it on their computers? Are they going to try to cram it into a smartphone app? Where are they at so that I can offer them the support and help that they need? And that's where my survey came in. So I asked my respondents, who aged and ranged from 18 to 70, about their tutorial use and their preferences to try to kind of flesh that out. First question they had was, have you ever used a tutorial? This was a broad, open-ended question. Could have been anything as long as it wasn't hard copy. And you'll note 20% of them actually had never used a tutorial or didn't remember. So that's going to be a bit of an issue, especially with non-traditional students. They're going to be probably a little less receptive to this and need more support. Then I said, if you have to learn computer skills, how do you want to do it? This face-to-face component is a face-to-face classroom setting versus the one-on-one. So this looks similar, but they're asking two different issues. You'll note that hard copy ranks down at the lowest, which is a bit of an issue because, again, we know that hard copy tutorials work. But obviously students prefer something with a little more interaction, with more of a video, with more of a moving image. So if we're continuing to use hard copy because we know it works, we may have to push back against a little bit of student resistance to that. Then I said, if we're learning computers, how important is it for you to see the demonstration? Because again, the simulator actually demonstrates the skill. Most of them thought it was somewhat important or very important. Handful didn't know, couple didn't care. But again, this is going to be one of the advantages of the simulator over the text, is that they will actually get to see somebody performing the skill. And I said, if you have to do a tutorial on this if-then statements, what are you going to use? Again, most of them said laptop or desktop, which is what we want. What I really don't want is my students trying to work through one of these tutorials on their smartphone when they're probably going to be interacting with the software on a computer of some kind. Finally, I said, okay, if we have to do this, how likely is it that you need a campus computer? And you note that there's quite a bit of range in terms of whether or not they would need one. This seems like a counterintuitive question because you're thinking, they're taking a computer class, they have to work with Excel. Obviously, they're going to have a computer. The problem with that is that if we use simulators, they also have to be able to work with video and they have to have a good internet connection. And especially in a state like Wyoming, I can require that my students have the software and they can log in once a week, get their assignments, take any tests that they need, and do the rest from home. If I switch to a simulated approach where they have to work with it, they're going to need internet connectivity, and some of them will need to work on the campus computers in order to do that, and that means that my program needs to make those available. Price. Price has been the primary obstacle to date for us not being able to include these things because they were so expensive. We were putting a $100 digital cost on top of a $278 textbook. That would have made the course materials pricier than the tuition. And Cengage now is offering an all-in-one digital pricing, which makes it more affordable, with essentially a free hard copy book, and the ebook is included in that digital portfolio of options. But we still need to understand how important price is. Obviously, nobody said not important at all, but it is very important. So if hard copy tends to work better, but simulated is acceptable and more affordable, that would be a direction to go. Again, if we know that the simulated works well, but students need more support, the affordability might be what tips us one direction or the other. So thank you for your time. I appreciate that you took a few minutes out to learn about digital tutorials versus hard copy tutorials and students' views on working with them. And I hope that